Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to switch gears a bit from the governance of AI to thinking a little bit about governance with AI. So I'm going to offer some thoughts from work that Sandy and I have been doing on what pluralist societies might need from digital civic infrastructure and what the potential might be for digitally mediated civic engagement. So as Sandy started us off with, humans developed at a time when collective decision-making was limited to small numbers of people with similar concerns. As we sought to coordinate across larger and larger distances, it became necessary to send representatives on behalf of the group. But representatives, even democratically elected ones, don't always share the interests of their constituents. And when they diverge, as we know, opportunities for corruption and elite capture can sometimes open up. With technologies that now enable very large numbers of people to communicate and make decisions on the same platform, we now have new opportunities for digitally enabled direct democracy at scale. Quantitative experiments, sometimes including tens of millions of individuals, have examined scaling, inclusiveness, and efficiency in decision-making via digital networks. And their findings suggest that large networks of non-experts can make practical, productive decisions and engage in collective action. Now, some would warn against technology that could further reinforce the nationalization of politics and political discourse. In the United States, citizens have increasingly turned away from the everyday problems of their local communities. Students who skip school, empty storefronts on Main Street, the level of property taxes. Instead, we've become transfixed by who might run for president, what their family members do, what national politician is currently under investigation, and what case is being heard today in the U.S. Supreme Court. This nationalization of politics, as we know, has led to partisan mega-identities in the U.S. The cleavage between parties increasingly overlaps with and reinforces socioeconomic cleavages. Liliana Mason writes, a single vote can now indicate a person's partisan preference as well as his or her religion, race, ethnicity, gender, neighborhood, and even favorite grocery store. We now have many reasons, not just a single one, to distance ourselves from those we see in the other camp. And not only do we disagree with their views, but we treat them like the bad guys. Polarization didn't just happen because of social media, but both ideological and affective polarization plays out on platforms that increase the speed and scale of interaction and ramps up the emotional intensity of confrontation. Not surprisingly, some leave in search of spaces with only like-minded people. Others get drawn in and double down on conflict. Neither is good for negotiating disagreement and either coming to a compromise or an agreement to disagree. Both reactions further reinforce the walls between us. One part of the answer might be to revitalize place-based identities and engagement. But it also seems clear that reinforcing local identities should not be the only approach. So many towns and neighborhoods, at least in the US, are now effectively mini one-party states. With the democratic sorting that has taken place over the last 40 years, focusing our attention just on local politics might inadvertently reinforce these local blocs. So we might actually want to break up these blocs with cross-cutting cleavages, the kinds of bridging social capital that Sandy was talking about, to connect people across localities, since many studies suggest that it's connections between these groups and communities that are a major source of innovation and change. Unfortunately, over the last decades, we've seen the decline of churches, fraternal organizations, and other forms of associational life that once served this function. So what we're working on with our research team is building new kinds of intermediating digital spaces, ones that provide some perspective and moderation, ones that focus on shared rather than personal problems, and ones that can accommodate discussion and deliberation at a large, even national scale. Can we design digital civic infrastructure to enable direct democracy for a national public while also dampening the polarization that has come with the nationalization of politics? To do so, we think we would have to solve for the following problems. The first is how to get people to want to engage. People have been walking away, we know, from civic participation for decades, and now they're doing so in droves. The second is how, once we are engaged, how to get people to want to understand the needs and concerns of others and to consider those concerns as we make decisions that affect all of us. How do we build digital infrastructure for civic engagement that addresses these problems? We think we might need to create new kinds of mediated civic engagement, ones that could make us more comfortable and more curious than we currently are in engaging with people on difficult public issues. Alexis de Tocqueville, who is often quoted in discussions about revitalizing American democracy, talked about town meetings as schools for teaching people how to use and enjoy liberty. Town meetings, as Tocqueville saw them, have become diminished. We no longer attend town meetings at the same rates, and when we do attend these meetings, we certainly do not enjoy them. Many online spaces for public discussion are no better, and some spaces, as we know, are far worse, with people or even bots who are yelling at each other and inciting virtual mobs. These are far from the noisy, sprawling social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit, are far from the ideal of leafy, tree-lined public squares and citizens' assemblies, where we can stand around listening and thinking, maybe doing some people watching and chatting to the person next to us. Given where things are with online political discussions, what could make engagement in collective discussions and decision-making tolerable or possibly even enjoyable in the way that Tocqueville praised? Even in Tocqueville's time, and probably for as long as humans have discussed things, people have lost their tempers and raised their voices. That's why it was important to have the option of standing on the edges of the square or the assembly and watching the spectacle, or being able to retreat there if things got to be too much. One could move a little further away, maybe strike up a side conversation, and just keep an ear out to see if the public conversation might be worth tuning into again. In today's online platforms, we have lost our power to calibrate how close we are to the conversation. We either choose to get on the platform and be confronted with all of the commentary that's on it, or we have to choose not to be on the platform at all. The work of political theorist Bernardo Zacca illuminates the importance of in-between spaces. Zacca's focus is on physical spaces, such as balconies on apartment buildings that overlook the street, and how they can enable what Zacca calls a kind of reserved sociability that strengthens pluralism in democratic societies. When the driver of a car starts honking in the street for somebody taking their parking space, and others start yelling at both cars to stop making so much noise, and maybe a shopkeeper runs out to suggest that maybe one of them goes and finds another spot, spaces such as balconies allow people to come out, see what's going on in public, and see how the drivers and shopkeeper are dealing with this conflict, and figure out whether, other people on their balconies approve or disapprove with the efforts. These in-between spaces, such as porches, stoops, courtyards, and lobbies, are interesting to Zacca because they serve a number of functions that are important for living in a pluralist society where there are all sorts of people. The first is a measure of safety and autonomy. Your balcony allows you to engage with what is going on in public, but you are also at a remove. You have control over whether you want to withdraw into your house. You can see the argument that's going on in the street. You can even shout a suggestion down if you want to, but you don't have to get involved, and you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. It gives you the perspective that comes with pulling back and having a bit of distance. You have a bird's eye view, but there's no pressure to do anything in particular. As Zacca notes, balconies offer an unobstructed view over a range of activities, enabling eyes and ears to wander freely. In this regard, they are similar to benches at the edge of a square. We think digital intermediation could help offer this kind of access to what the urban planner Jane Jacobs described as the lively and diverse intermingling and interaction of strangers in the public arena that is at the same time under one's control, at one's leisure, protected by anonymity, and as Tocqueville described, enjoyable. Jacobs thought that the diversity of city life could be wonderful, but only when the city brought diverse people together without forcing them to be too close. When people were forced to be too close, she noted, they tended to withdraw into their private spaces, foregoing interaction with others and becoming less tolerant of diversity. These qualities of safety and anonymity, autonomy and control over one's time, attention, and intensity of engagement, including the ability to step back from within the discussion for perspective on the whole, enable people to process diversity and disagreement on their own terms and learn to tolerate it. This is what we want to design for. While too much intimacy and too much information can be off-putting, online platforms for discussion and deliberation could give those the ability to dip their toes in first, then slowly wade in as they become interested enough to find out what others think, particularly when the platform enables them to maintain a kind of depersonalized distance. Two examples of online platforms that start to illustrate this kind of digital intermediation are the School of Possibilities, an AI-enabled platform for public engagement on school reform, recently piloted in Romania by Eric Gordon, a professor of civic media at Emerson College, and the Polis platform, which has been widely used for public deliberation around the world. We write about these in a forthcoming essay, and many of you know Polis well, so I won't expand on them here. But our research team is currently building on these examples to design and test features that would enable the kind of reserved sociability and civic engagement that can best contribute to a healthy, pluralist democracy. Digital innovations, of course, as we've been talking about, also raise questions about how to mitigate potential risks and harms. In a recent paper that we published at MIT in their AI Impact series, our team has written about how important it is to integrate generative AI into these platforms in ways that uphold our fundamental democratic commitments, our social compact, as Dr. Nelson noted, to preserving human agency and autonomy, encouraging mutual respect, promoting equality and inclusiveness, and augmenting rather than substituting for active citizenship. For example, we don't want AI chatbots who nudge people towards more agreement on these platforms just because the chatbots are better at writing in friendlier or more authoritative voices. When we're not aware of these effects or the integration of AI into the platform more broadly, it also raises questions about whether the principles of agency and respect are really being upheld, again, as the AI Bills of Rights that we saw reinforce. Generative AI makes it possible to increase the speed with which groups reach consensus by suggesting the kinds of policy statements and solutions that people might be most likely to agree with. This can be super helpful, but we don't want a focus on efficiency to reduce the kinds of new realizations and creative ideas that emerge from people having in-depth debates. Participants can also become too dependent on AI, leading to a lack of critical engagement with the issues under discussion and with the views and arguments expressed by other individuals. So generative AI needs to help us look for information as we seek to educate ourselves about the issues, rather than doing all the work for us. And of course, there's always the risk of over-censorship or differential censorship. AI-based features can disproportionately silence certain viewpoints. Models can have biases due to algorithmic design decisions and the data that they're trained on. And external entities can engage in manipulation. Protecting and preserving minority interests and views remains important. It will be crucial to keep these and other potential pitfalls top of mind. We also argue that creating online platforms that revitalize civic engagement requires two capabilities that are often missing in digital platforms. The first is identity authentication that can ensure that everyone on the platform is a human entitled to engage on the platform. So no bots and maybe no commercial companies. It used to be that knowing someone's identity was necessary to ensure that they actually had rights to participate. Now, technology enables us to separate the two so that you can be anonymous, but others can know and be sure that you are a real person with legitimate standing in the community. The data and relationships that we co-generate with others in our economic and social interactions, our bank, our doctors, government, friends, these form our digital identity. These relationships can attest to who we are. And the multiplicity of these relationships means that no one actor can deny you rights associated with your identity. In the digital realm, this kind of community grounding of digital identity is well known to be one of the most secure methods of protecting citizens from malicious attack. Any successful engagement infrastructure must also give us rights over these data and digital relationships, and not just privacy rights, but also ownership and use rights. The dual nature of this anonymity and authenticated identity can enable a new reserved civic engagement that can make us more comfortable with interacting with fellow community members that might otherwise seem very different or foreign to us, and help us increase our tolerance of diversity and pluralism. Second, digital intermediation could help us focus more on public issues and avoid the emotional reactions and personal biases that can cloud our judgment. Such platforms can provide summarizations and visualizations of the overall status of the discussion online in a way that is analogous to watching a town assembly while walking around the edges of the square, or looking down on a heated discussion in the street from your balcony. You can consider the conversation from different vantage points and decide what those vantage points are. You don't have to insert yourself into the goings-on unless you want to, and when you do, you are protected because you can choose to remain anonymous. By giving us control and autonomy over how and when we participate, digital intermediation can help us cool our initial reaction to the conversation and create the emotional distance that enables us to activate our more analytical and logical reasoning modes. So the interactive intermediation that AI could make possible can also help establish the kinds of norms of communication that we would normally use in arm's-length interactions with people we don't know very well, but also have no reason to suspect of ill intent. Finally, digital intermediation on online platforms can be designed to take advantage of our natural curiosity and playfulness. And our interests in people watching, eavesdropping, and checking out what others are looking at are important aspects of what makes us human. We need to design digital platforms for civic engagement that help us satisfy these instincts that undergird and strengthen human sociality. And of course, these platforms could be used to improve both local and national public discussion and deliberation. So in sum, we need to develop more of these kinds of digital technologies that can offer new opportunities for civic engagement that uphold democratic principles, as well as make us feel safe and protected, and enable us to look out over the public discussion while giving us control over how much we want to get into it. Only then can we fully use and enjoy our liberty again in the way that Tocqueville thought was so special about us. Thank you.